Hi there, I'm Courtney from Pragmatic. In this video, we're going to be doing something a little different than the other videos you may have seen for feedback loop, where I'm giving feedback to students, or in our individual tutorials where I'm going over a specific principle or idea. Here, I'm going to be diving in and creating a design where we're going to be using a number of the principles that we've covered in other videos. I'm going to be linking to those as we go, so you have an opportunity to go dive deeper into those individual methods or topics. The final design that we'll be creating is seen here. Now, this looks pretty straightforward, but our goal is really to learn the processes necessary to allow you to work faster and to make more complex designs easier to create. In this exercise, we're going to be covering grids, styles, components, auto layout, and variants, all things that you want to be really good at if you're going to be getting into interface design. All the assets that you'll need to create this design and follow along are included in the description below. But I really want to see what you come up with. So if you take this design and you recreate what you have here, or if you decide to remix this and really push it forward, I would love to see what you come up with. Be sure to link to your work in the comments below so we can talk about what you've come up with. All right, so as we get started, what I'm going to be doing here is I'm going to basically just walk you through my process for creating this design. And I will be speeding certain areas up, but I will try to slow down as we go so that you can stop it and see exactly what I'm working on. So first of all, I'm going to take my tools and bring them back to the foreground. That is Command \. And now I've got this design and I see that it's 1440 in width. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to come up here to the frame tool and I'm going to grab a desktop frame. And something that always throws people off is like there's this little blink that happens. If a design or a shape is part of the actual frame, you'll see it cut off here. If it's not, you tend to see it outside. The one thing that will change that, if you select the frame, is this clip content. And clip content will show you everything that's associated with the frame, regardless of where it's at on the frame. But if you have clip content on, it will only show you the area that is inside of the frame itself. So we've created our frame, and that's great. I want to give this a name. I'm just going to call this 5 call. And now the first thing that I want to do is I want to make sure that whatever shapes that we're creating are actually going to line up with a grid. So to get this started, I will select our frame. I'll come down here to Layout Grid. And Layout Grid, I'm going to come into the controls here, change this to columns. And now I really want to know what the margin is. I bet it's something like 30. That's pretty close. I want to get it right on that margin if possible. So it looks like it's about 34, somewhere between 34 and 35. Let's look at the gutter though. Let's look at the gutter. Okay, so the gutter is pretty big. Let's try to see if it'll work even. And it looks pretty good even. So I'm just going to leave that a margin of 34 and a gutter of 34. So the margin is to the outside and the gutter is to the inside. All right. Now, the other thing I want to do while we're here on this is I want to go ahead and save this. So I will create a grid style and I'll call this 5 call. So that now has a style to where if I create another design somewhere else and I need it to have a 5 column grid, this is already ready to go. All right. The next thing that I want to do is look at the typography because we've got our grid set up. Now I want to really focus in on the typography, and for this exercise, I've got all the typography that we'll need already here. And as you can see, the typography here has some specific styling to it. The one thing I'll mention right now is this design, this typography is called Active Grotesque. And Active Grotesque is an Adobe font. If you do not have access to Active Grotesque, I think it's completely fine just to leave this in a Roboto. You can see it changes very little. But Active Grotesque, by its just stature, is just a wee bit wider. I obviously have some different sizes here that I don't want to have to go and like copy paste. I don't want to get into that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and kind of size these up and just see what we have. As you can see, this is a bit wider, so I'm going to adjust the letter spacing. So it's like 12 on 12. And then Joseph Espana seems like that's probably like a bold, maybe an extra bold. No, it's definitely not extra bold. It's bold. I'm going to guess that it's like 20. That looks really big. So it's definitely not 20. Probably 18. Or exactly 18. So if that's 18, I'm going to guess that this is regular. And the real trick here is it looks like this has more line height. This is probably 16, but it probably has more line height. So I'm going to go ahead and say 180%. 180%? That's way too big. 140%. Let's take that back to where it was. Maybe it's actually pretty close. Yeah, it's actually pretty close. So maybe what we really need here is space between the lines. So I'm going to go in here to paragraph spacing, and I'm just going to give this 8. See if it's like on an 8-pixel grid. And to be honest with you, it's not quite there. So I'm going to go with, looks like it's something closer to 4 or 5. Let's just say 4, because that's we can get to our 8-pixel grid pretty quickly from there. But okay, so now I've got these styles kind of figured out. We've got our label, we've got our title, and then this is really more of I'll say label, name, and then this is just paragraph text. So I want to go ahead and create some styles here. So I'm going to go into text, create a style. I'm going to call this one label. Create style. I'll come in and create this one. We'll call this one, for lack of a better, we'll just call this H3 name, because I'm guessing it's something like an H3 that we would use. And then this here would just be a intro. Okay, so if we look at this, we've got label, H3 name, and intro created. That means that we should be able to come through here for the rest of these and go ahead and assign these styles that will make this much easier to get together. So I'm going to go ahead and speed this up now and go ahead and add these styles. Okay, so we've taken the time now to create the text styles that are necessary, and that allows us to style these pretty quickly. But what I really want to do is I want to make these shapes really easy to replicate. I don't necessarily want to have to copy the photo over, make sure it's all lined up, copy the text over, make sure it's all lined up. What I actually want to do is I want to come in here and create the shape itself that will be the base component. So I'm going to come in here with a rectangle, and just, one of the great things is if you've created columns, it will force everything to line up, and that the fact that it's lining up makes it really easy to come in here and begin to quickly draw shapes. All right, so that's going to be our base shape. I'll show you a couple different ways that we could come through and design the typography, because we could be doing this with auto layout as well, but this is so simple that I can just create a few different styles that I don't necessarily have to get into auto layout here. But I am going to name this label, or we'll say full name, workplace, and then down here we'll simply say, and you may be asking yourself, Chris, what is the point of this? And the point of this is I want to create a component so that these are easier to put together should I have another design that follows the same pattern elsewhere in my project. All right, so I've got my photo here, my photo shape. I've got my text shape. I'm going to drag this to the top. Let's see, that's about, maybe it's a little more space between the two. Okay, so we've got our shape. Now I've called this one call promo, and I've talked about I don't necessarily need to have auto layout built into the typography. But as you can see from our design, not all of these photos are the same size. So what I really need to do is, instead of grouping this right away, I need to come through and add auto layout. And I'm going to do that. And what auto layout allows us to do is it allows us to basically say, if this shape changes, make this typography go with it. All right. So I've added auto layout, and this works differently if you switch it to the side. Auto layout is much like Flexbox. It is direction specific. So you can make it go down, you can make it go to the side, but you can't make it go in both directions. It's not like CSS Grid. Right now there's a space between the two of 18. Because I'm such a nerd on the 8 pixel grid, I'm gonna change this to 16. And that tightens it up just ever so slightly. And now I will grab this. We'll go ahead and call this one call intro. And we'll copy one call intro over to a new page called components. I'll paste that in. And now that we've got this, it's utilizing auto layout. It's utilizing styles. We've got it on a grid. Let's go ahead and make it a component. Now that it's a component, I can take it back over to the main page, and I'm not going to worry about the content yet. But what I am going to do is I'm going to just drag in my components, and I'm going to replicate that 5 times over. And now I can begin to lay in the content that I have. It's already styled. It's not going to hurt anything to do it this way. And with that in place, let's go ahead and get our images. Now, I've got these images included right here. So I could very easily just come over and say, copy properties, grab the image itself, paste properties in there, and there's my image. We'll do the same for the rest of these. Okay, so I've got the images in place. The one thing that I don't have is I don't have the photo here for Rodrigo sized properly. So if auto layout is working as intended, we should simply be able to come in and adjust the height of this. The problem is, because this is a component, it's going to want to push back on this idea that I want to resize the size of this. So what I'm typically going to do here is I'm going to go ahead and detach the instance, and that means that I now have control over this. It's no longer connected to the main component. I want this to be larger, and then I can also come in and move the cat photo down. So now we get the cat on the hat, and Rodrigo is ready to go. We also have the recent interviews line here at the top, and that looks a lot like the typography style that we have for the name of our individuals. So I'm going to simply take that, call it recent interviews. Let's go ahead and give that a style of H3. That's pretty much it. Let's grab recent interviews, bring it over here. Looks like there's like a line just off to the side of it. So we will Take that line. The thickness of that line may be a bit in question. Is it 10? Clearly not. Probably more like 4. Let's go ahead and compare. 4 is way too thick. I bet it's 2. Bingo. Now, we can go ahead and create a component out of that as well. Couple of things I'd want to do first. So I'd want to tweak that, make sure it's right in the middle, just like the main design was calling for. And we could really get in here and do some work, because that's going to be variable in width. We could get in here and probably do some work with auto layout, but I will leave that to you, as we've already created most the components that we need the most. Let's go ahead and hide our grid, and voila, we have the design that we came to create. Now we could come in here working through our components. We could say, hey, you know, I want a slightly different design, and this secondary design, maybe I want to on hover put an effect on the photo. So what I'll do here is I'll make the blur wider. This is where variants come into play. And now if I call this one call intro / hover. So now we have the ability to create a variant. One of the things I like to do, and this is very helpful, is if you add a / and then the particular type of variant that is, in this case it's hover, afterward, when you make, so I'll now make this a component. When I group these together, it will say combine as variants. So now we've created this variant. So we have our main, and then we have our hover. The one thing I'll point out is when you come through and you have a variant, if you change that default to the variant, it will overwrite the other content that you've added into this, because it's actually changing to another shape. So you'll have to go back in and basically re-import that information. And then here, what I found is that if I copy the styling over from the image itself doesn't have a shadow on it. But if I want it to retain this shadow, the easiest thing for me to do is to come over here to fill, go down to image, and you can see the shadow is still there. And then I can choose that from my desktop, and the shadow is maintained. You can still see the faint glow of it. And maybe just to show us what that glow really is, let's go through here and make it a little more pronounced. We'll make it red. So that glow is pretty pronounced. Now when we come back over, you can see that has now taken effect back over on the main image. Remember, I'm super excited to see what you come up with. All the assets that you need to work alongside with me are included in the description below. Just be sure to submit back in your copy of the work in the comments below. And a final note, if you're looking for mentorship, listen to what other New Pragmatic students have to say about working one-on-one with me at New Pragmatic.
I tell people all the time, if you're looking for a design mentor, then you should definitely work with Chris.
You gotta 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 work with Chris.
If you're thinking about joining the program or working with Chris, don't hesitate. Reach out and sign up.
Reach out today to find out about our monthly mentorship packages.